On September 16, 1994, 62 students in a school located in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, witnessed one of the most bizarre UFO encounters in history. This account is bizarre in numerous ways. Not only was a being and a UFO seen by multiple students, but it was also quickly documented by a news crew, and many of the children, who are now adults, continue to maintain that what they saw was something not of this world. Here's a summary of the Ariel School incident. Ariel School is located in Ruwa, Zimbabwe. Ruwa is a small community located southeast of the capital of Zimbabwe. In 1994, Ruwa was a smaller farming area and trading center, but over the years the city has begun to grow. As it is today, in 1994, Ariel School was a private school with black and white students that were usually from wealthier families. The school's vision, as stated in their website, is to offer an all-around quality education which is personally enriching and relevant to children of all abilities in a supportive, safe, stimulating, and conducive learning environment. The children in the Ariel School would range between the ages of 6 through 12 years. Now, prior to the occurrence at the Ariel School, there had been other sightings of unknown objects in the sky. One occurrence happened in Kariba, Zimbabwe. Kariba is a 5-hour drive from Ruwa, and according to an eyewitness that was interviewed by the BBC, he described an object coming over the top of a hill that changed from a glow to 2 big orange spheres. He originally believed it to be a plane, but what made it extremely unusual was that there was no sound as this object approached. Also, according to this man's testimony, he and 14 others witnessed this unusual event. Now, it must be noted that according to author and creator of Skeptoid, Brian Dunning, around the time that the people in Zimbabwe and Zambia were witnessing unusual lights in the skies, there had been a re-entry of a rocket from the Cosmos 2290 satellite launch. Can this be what the witnesses saw in the sky before the Ariel School incident, or was this a precursor of what was to come? Now, on September 16th, 1994, the students were outside playing during their mid-morning recess. The faculty was inside for a staff meeting. The approximately 200 students were being monitored by a single member of the faculty. In the span of about 15 minutes, the children were about to witness something extraordinary. At around 10 a.m., 62 of the 200 children were drawn to an area beyond their playing field. This area was filled with thorns, long grass, and overgrown bushes. There were also trees scattered throughout this area of the field. The undergrowth was so thick and tall that a child could hide within these fields. Now, while the children were venturing out beyond the play area, they saw 3 or 4 objects flying into the area. These objects were in the shape of a disc and landed on the grassy hill and among the trees. Though some of the children were afraid, they were also curious as to what they were witnessing, so they walked closer to the landing spot. Now, after the objects landed, they began to see a creature emerge. Different accounts state that there were anywhere from 1 to 4 creatures emerging from the ship. According to the statement of one of these children, what he saw was a little man about 1 meter tall who was dressed in black. This man had a shiny suit and he had long black hair, and his eyes were lower on the cheeks than those of a normal human. The eyes were also described as large and elongated. The mouth was just a slit and the ears were hardly discernible. This description was given by multiple other students. It must also be noted that some of the younger students ran away as the ships landed and as the creatures began to emerge. Many of the older students stayed to witness this occurrence. Some later reports include that the children received telepathic messages about the importance of the environment and to take care of the planet, or the world would end. But we'll get back to those messages later. The creatures then went back to their ship and left. The children then ran back to where the playing field was at and immediately told their teachers and the faculty. The children were adamant about what they saw and couldn't stop telling their teachers. They were in turn told to shut up, and the classes proceeded as usual. When the children arrived back at their home, they continued to talk about what they saw, and this worried their parents. The parents made multiple calls to the school asking why their children were so scared, and it was finally at this point that the teachers began to realize that maybe there was something to what the children were saying. Now, ZBC Radio soon began reporting the sightings, and this was picked up by BBC's correspondent in Zimbabwe, Tim Leach. On September 19th, only 3 days after the sighting, Tim Leach went to the Ariel School to interview the children about what they saw. Here's an excerpt of what the children said they saw.
Could you tell me what you saw on Friday?
Well, it looked like it was like glinting in the trees. Like it looked like roundabout like a disc, like a round.
Are you sure it
Yeah.
wasn't a Harrier jump jet or
No,
something that the Zimbabwe Air
It
Force
was
have
like
got?
in a disc.
I saw something silver on the ground amongst the trees and a person in black.
They had big black eyes. That's all I saw. I saw a glimpse. They kind of turned around and stared and then went back into a kind of like ship.
I saw this silver thing in amongst this clump of trees with this one thing sitting on the side and another thing sort of like running up and down the top.
What does he look like?
His face was like this, and his eyes were down here.
Now, according to some accounts, Tim Leach then reached out to his friend Cynthia Hind about the incident. Cynthia Hind was an author and a firm believer in alien encounters. In a day, she arrived at Ruwa and began interviewing the children. While interviewing the children, she also asked them to draw what they saw. The children began drawing images of the ships and the creatures that they saw, and the creatures alongside those ships. Cynthia Hind's interviews began to gain popularity and circulate in the media, and soon this encounter gained worldwide attention. A couple of months later, Dr. John E. Mack, a Pulitzer Prize-winning professor of psychiatry from Harvard Medical School, came to also interview the children. It was during his interviews that the children began to inform him that the beings were telepathically telling them about the environment and the sanctity of Earth. His reports included that the aliens told the children to protect the planet and to not rely too much on technology. Dr. Mack's studies and interviews continued to add to the mystery and popularity of the strange encounter at the Ariel school. About 3 decades have passed, and many of the children who are now adults have been interviewed over the years and continue to say that what they saw on September 16, 1994 was not of this world. So let's talk about some of the theories and some of the controversies. One theory is that the story was a hoax made up by the children. I personally don't believe that this was a hoax, because I do believe that the students believe they saw something that day. The reason also is because over the last 30 years, they continue to defend their story. Now, with that said, there were some problems with the way they were interviewed by Cynthia Hind. The main problem was that she was interviewing the children in groups of 2 through 6 students at a time. This could potentially affect the accounts of what the witnesses saw, because it could influence the details from one student to the next. Cynthia Hind was also asked by a television show called Sightings if the children were influenced by TV programs and movies. Her reply was, quote, "Well, a lot of these children don't go to the movies. They live in the country. Their parents are farmers," unquote. But let's not forget that these children were from wealthy families. They were not poor. They had access to popular television and movies. Now, as for Dr. Mack, he was a very well-renowned psychiatrist, but at this point in his career, he was having professional difficulties. Much of these difficulties stemmed from his belief in alien abductions, which did not sit well with his colleagues. Dr. Mack was becoming a pariah in the medical community, and maybe he believed that a solid case of encounters with aliens would vindicate his beliefs. There was also the coincidence that Dr. Mack stated that it is, quote, "quite possible that the protection of the Earth's life is at the heart of the abduction phenomenon," unquote. This statement he made seemed to align with the telepathic messages received by the students that Dr. Mack was reporting. Now, there are still other theories that this was a case of mass hysteria among the children, and there's also a theory that the children did see something, but it wasn't aliens or a ship. And finally, there is a theory that the children did see and have an encounter with beings not from Earth. I do want to end this with 2 of the children who were interviewed as adults and their accounts of what happened. One account was as recent as 2021, where a co-host named Za in the podcast Macrodosing recounts his first-hand view of the encounter at the school. He was 6 at the time, but much of his story aligns with the stories that all the older children told back in 1994. The other account was in 2014, and the student, now an adult, recounts what she saw, but also has hesitancy in talking about it because of what others might say. In a chilling quote, she said, "You want to know the real message here? The real message is that this stuff can brand you for life. It undermined Mac's credibility, became this huge unending thing for others, and it certainly messed me up. I mean, try telling people that you live in permanent fear of these things returning one day. Try telling them that you can actually sense when they're back in our atmosphere. They'll think you're a kook. So, what do you think happened? Do you think that the children saw an alien, a UFO, a ship? Was it a hoax? Was it mass hysteria? Were they influenced by the people that came in to interview them? I'd like to know your theories. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this newest video. And to all the new subscribers, I greatly appreciate that also. If you have the opportunity, we do a podcast called Geekers Creepers, where we talk about the geeky side of life and we talk about the creepy side of life. It's a little more lighthearted, but we do talk about these topics. So if you have a chance, I'd greatly appreciate you having a listen. And so until next time, I do wish you all the best in life, love, and gaming.